Sometimes all it takes is one ignored gesture, one message seen but never answered, to trigger an earthquake inside you. Not because you're weak, but because you gave too much. You insisted, you chased, you waited, with your heart in suspense, hoping they'd notice everything you were offering. You thought that the more love you gave, the more you'd be loved, that the more patience you showed, the more they'd finally understand. But the truth is darker. The more you show how much you care about someone who never truly valued you, the more invisible you become in their eyes. It's cruel, but it's real. Someone who never truly chose you learns to take you for granted. Someone who never deeply appreciated you starts seeing your presence as background noise. And in that quiet dynamic, you begin to erase yourself, little by little, hoping one day they'll wake up and say, "I miss you." But that day never comes, because the person who ignores you while you're chasing them is the same person who would only chase you back once you've disappeared, once your absence finally becomes louder than your forced presence. That's the paradox. The more available you are, the weaker you seem. The more you pursue, the less you're worth, not because you lack value, but because your energy begins to look cheap, taken for granted, like something they don't need to fight for. And so you keep trying, you bend, you shrink, you step aside until one day you start to feel something break inside you. Quietly, repeatedly, your dignity. And yet, inside even the deepest frustration, there's a breaking point that isn't destruction, it's awakening. A silent shift. The moment you realize that someone who made you feel too much doesn't even deserve a second of your energy. And that's where it all begins to change. Not out there, in here. The moment you stop expecting them to get it. The moment you stop typing one more message. The moment you turn off your phone and turn your awareness back on. Awakening isn't a dramatic scene. It's a quiet click inside that finally whispers, "It's not worth it anymore." And that's when the real transformation begins. Not toward them, toward yourself. Because this isn't about revenge, it's not about hate, it's about emotional survival. Self-respect. Discipline. That's the first step toward inner mastery. You no longer need to beg, explain, or chase. You don't need to prove anything to someone who never saw your worth. Your silence starts to speak. Your absence starts to echo. And the person who ignored you now begins to feel the weight of what they couldn't hold on to. You're not disappearing to be desired. You're stepping away to find yourself again. To end the quiet humiliation of always being the one who loves more, gives more, waits more. Because someone who made you feel invisible while you stood there with your heart wide open never deserved the privilege of watching you bloom. Stopping the chase is not surrender. It's a declaration. Truth no one says out loud, but it changes everything. I'm not chasing you anymore because I finally understood. You were never the one who was too much. I was just blind to how much I was really worth. That truth, cold as stone and sharp as silence, is what sets you free. And when that moment comes, when you stop asking for explanations, stop waiting for apologies, stop hoping for clarity, pain begins to shift, turns into power. Your voice retreats, but your presence expands. Because now you're no longer available. You're no longer the one who's always there. Now you're elsewhere within. And the one who lost you will begin to realize it. But it'll be too late. Write it in the comments as a promise to yourself. I am untouchable. When you keep chasing someone who never truly chose you, you're not just wasting your time. You're slowly losing yourself. And the cruelest part is, you don't even realize it at first. It feels like love. It feels like devotion. It feels like effort. But it's not. It's imbalance. A one-sided story where you're giving everything and receiving nothing. And the longer it goes on, the more you convince yourself that just one more step, one more act of kindness might finally change something. You tell yourself that patience is a virtue, that love waits, but that's a lie. True self-love doesn't allow you to destroy your peace for someone who continues to ignore your existence. Every unanswered message you sent was a fragment of your inner peace slipping away. Every time you checked if they were online, every time you watched their stories hoping for a signal, every time you tried to be noticed, you were slowly draining your soul. You accepted the role of the invisible one, the one who loves quietly, hoping that love alone would be enough to be chosen. But that's not how it works. Being there isn't enough. Giving your best isn't enough. Sacrificing everything isn't enough. Because when someone never truly sees you, you become invisible even while standing right in front of them. The chase wears you down. It empties you. It morphs you into someone you barely recognize. You start to adapt, shrink your boundaries, accept silences you don't deserve, cold responses that pierce through you, vague promises that never arrive. And you justify it. You tell yourself maybe they're scared, maybe they need time, maybe they're healing. But deep down, a wiser voice whispers what you refuse to hear. You're erasing yourself in hopes of being loved by someone who doesn't even know what love truly means. And what's worse is that you get used to it. You get used to receiving less, to feeling like you're never enough, to living in uncertainty. It becomes your new normal. Waiting, being ignored, feeling the dull ache of emotional absence, and your heart begins to break, not because it can't love, but because it's tired of being ignored. Not because it can't give, but because it never receives. Not because it can't believe, but because it's always hoping. Alone. You built castles out of crumbs. You mistook boredom for interest. You romanticized indifference as shyness, coldness as mystery, absence as fear. Because you needed to believe. You needed it to be worth it. But now you're here, and deep inside, you know, it wasn't. And if you're honest, a part of you always knew. But you didn't want it to be true, so you kept going, and in doing so, you lost yourself. In chasing them, you gave up your center. You lived for their moods, their messages, their vanishings. And every time they returned with a single drop of attention, it felt like a feast. One message was enough to make you feel worthy again. One signal, and you'd forget days of silence. But that's not love. That's emotional dependence. That's need. That's illusion. That's fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of not being enough. Fear that if they leave, then maybe you're nobody. That's the price. The painful price you've paid for something that was never real. You've lost time, energy, dreams, dignity. But most of all, you lost connection with yourself. And no one can give that back to you, no one but you. And you will only when you stop, when you say enough, when you finally walk away. You were not born to be ignored. You weren't meant to be someone's second choice. You're not here to beg for attention or affection. And above all, you were not made to chase someone who never truly deserved you. Someone who really wanted you in their life would never make you run after them. Someone who respected you would never keep you waiting. Someone who felt anything real would never play games with your silence. Now you know. Every time you chase someone who doesn't see you, you teach them it's okay to ignore you. You show them they can take your time without giving anything in return. You let them enjoy your presence without ever offering theirs. That's how imbalance begins. That's how toxic relationships are born. Not with a scream, but with a quiet whisper. I'm still waiting for you to notice me, but not anymore. From this moment on, stop being the one who waits. Stop being the one who runs after people. Stop deleting yourself just to make space for those who never had the courage to choose you. Be the echo of your own worth. Be the voice that refuses to fold. Be the distance that teaches. Be the presence that no longer comes cheap. And above all, remember who you are. Not someone's fallback. Not a second choice, not a backup plan. You are enough, but only for those who have the eyes to see you and the heart to hold you. There comes a moment when all the words have been spoken, when every attempt has been made, when you've poured out every last drop of your energy for someone who never truly deserved you. And in that moment, there is nothing left but silence. Not the kind of silence that waits, that hopes, that begs to be broken. No, this is a different silence. Cold, calculated, strategic, a silence not empty but full of clarity, full of dignity, full of self-respect. Disappearing was never a sign of weakness. It was always a sign of strength. It's what you do when staying costs more than walking away. It's what happens when you finally realize that your presence, if not respected, is nothing but a wasted gift. So you go quiet, you vanish, you step back, not to hurt, but to heal, not to manipulate, but to breathe. Not for revenge, but to remind yourself that you matter too, that you deserve to be seen, heard, chosen. And when silence is loaded with meaning, it becomes something powerful. It breaks patterns, it disrupts dynamics, it dismantles the power they once held over you. Because when you no longer react, no longer beg, no longer chase, something begins to shift, not instantly, but slowly. They begin to feel disarmed, powerless, because they can no longer control you with indifference. They can no longer punish you with distance, because now you are the distance. Strategic absence is an invisible weapon. It doesn't scream, it doesn't strike, it wears down. Because those who were used to having you always there, receiving your words, your affection, your presence, now face a void they don't know how to fill, a void that no longer depends on them, but on you. And in that space, they begin to notice the difference between what they took for granted and what they now deeply miss. There is no need for dramatic explanations, no need for emotional monologues, no need to end things with speeches or theatrics. When you choose to disappear, to cut the flow, to end the connection, the message arrives anyway, loud, clear, undeniable. I've stopped fighting to stay where I'm not seen. And that's when silence becomes something else entirely, a form of victory, not the kind that defeats another, but the kind that reclaims you. A silent triumph born not from revenge, but from emotional sovereignty. Because true power doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from mastering yourself, from controlling your impulses, from detaching from the need for approval, the urge to be chased, the craving to be chosen. Because the truth is, the one who can remain silent, who can sit in absence without panic, without explanations, without seeking closure, is already a giant, a warrior, because they've learned to hold their ground in solitude, indecision. And for the one who took you for granted, that's a shock, because they expected a reaction. They expected your voice, another message. But nothing comes, no words, no signals, just absence. And in that silence, a mirror appears. They begin to look inward. They start to wonder, why aren't you here anymore? What changed? Where did you go? And the answer is simple. You went home, back to yourself, to the one place no one uses you, no one ignores you, where your voice matters, even in silence. The one who wounded you with their indifference isn't ready to face your own, because those who hold power panic when they lose it. And through your silence, that's exactly what you're doing, stripping them of that power. You're saying hut without saying, I am worth too much to keep begging for your attention. You're rewriting the rules, and you're doing it with the most noble weapon, distance. Detachment is an art, and like any art, it requires mastery. You don't perfect it in a day, but when you finally can, and when you detach fully, when you can remain absent without collapsing into need, you've won. You've broken the chain. You've flipped the game. The one who always saw you as available, present, predictable, now faces something they cannot control, your disappearance. Not physical, emotional. And that kind of absence makes more noise than 1,000 words. It hurts more than 1,000 screams. Because silence speaks the truth they've always tried to avoid. You are no longer orbiting their world. And so yes, silence becomes your victory. Not a loud public win, but a majestic one. The kind of win that doesn't need applause or revenge. The kind that says, I've learned that my absence is the most powerful lesson I could ever give you. Because only when you stop being there, do they finally begin to understand who you truly were. At first, they don't notice. They think this is just another one of your breaks, that you'll be back and like always, that your silence is just a tactic, a little performance to get their attention. But time moves on, and you don't return. Hours turn into days, days into a stillness with no excuse. And slowly a question begins to creep in. What if this time it's forever? The person who once took you for granted lives under the illusion that you're constant, that no matter how far they drift, you'll always be there. That even if they ignore you, you'll find a way to show up again. Because they got used to your presence, your availability, your consistency. In their mind, you were the backup plan that never disappeared. But when your absence becomes real, silent, total, and untouchable, something breaks inside them, not around them. inside. At first, they react with indifference. Maybe they post a photo, a story, a quote that screams to the world how free and unbothered they are without you. But it's a mask, a performance for others, and especially for themselves, because they do miss you. And the more time passes, the more that absence turns into panic. Not because they suddenly love you, but because they're losing control. This isn't a break. This isn't you going silent to provoke a reaction. This is you, gone, for real. Your absence starts to make noise, not through words, but through the echo left in unexpected moments, in the pauses of a busy day, in the nights where sleep won't come, in the quiet where your message used to appear. There's no more notification with your name, no more morning text, no more feeling of being at the center of something, just emptiness. And that emptiness, once mistaken for freedom, now becomes something else entirely. Discomfort, restlessness, longing. The person who never truly valued you begins to understand. It wasn't your presence that suffocated them. It was their own emotional immaturity. And now the void they asked for is devouring them. They check their notifications. Nothing. They type and erase a message. They look at your profile, hoping to find a trace of your life. But everything is silent, no updates, no signs, no reactions, just stillness. And that stillness becomes a mirror. It shows them the truth, not just about who they are, but who you've become. Someone who stopped chasing, someone who chose emotional self-mastery, someone who disappeared and decided not to come back. Panic doesn't always arrive like a storm. Sometimes it creeps in, subtle, slow. It comes in the form of unanswered questions. Why haven't they reached out? Are they okay? Did they meet someone? Did they forget me? And the longer your silence lasts, the more those thoughts turn into obsession. The one who was once indifferent now hunts for signs, but you give them nothing. And that's exactly where the true power shift begins. The person who once hurt you now retraces every step, every word, every moment, trying to figure out where it went wrong. But they won't say it, not out loud, not yet. Instead, they'll try to break the silence. Maybe they'll send you something casual, emotionless, a shallow, "Hey, how are you?" Like nothing ever happened. It's bait, a trap. But you don't bite. Not because you're angry, but because you've chosen coldness, you've chosen balance. You've chosen never to return to the place where you were diminished. That's when the real crisis begins, because now they understand. This isn't a tantrum. Your silence isn't anger, it's evolution. Your absence isn't a punishment, it's a boundary. Your calmness isn't indifference, it's discipline. And that's what disarms them completely. Because someone who never deserved you is not prepared to face this version of you. The one who doesn't break, doesn't chase, doesn't explain, doesn't leave any cracks open. It won't matter how many stories they post, how many forced smiles they display, how many indirect quotes they write. You know the truth. Behind every attempt to seem fine, there's one emotion screaming from beneath: regret. And that regret doesn't come from just missing your presence. It comes from realizing they had you and they lost you. They were inside your world and treated it carelessly. They had access to your light and played with it like it meant nothing. And now, they can't touch it anymore. While they squirm in your silence, you breathe, because you no longer need to be seen. You no longer need to prove anything. Your growth happened in your absence, without confrontation, without loud exits, without drama, just through the quiet decision not to be available anymore. The one who once ignored you is now looking for you. And they can't find the door. That is the real victory, not revenge, not reconciliation, but unreachability. The deep knowing that the person who once took you for granted is now drowning in the very emptiness they created. And not because of who you've become today, but because of what they threw away when they still had it all. Real change doesn't need to be announced. Those who truly evolve don't say it, they embody it. They let their presence speak louder than any declaration. And duties have changed, but not in some theatrical way, not with catchy quotes or loud proclamations. You changed in silence, in solitude, in distance. You became something no one expected, A new presence, strong, calm, cold, and unrecognizable. You did what most people never dare to do. You disappeared from the noise to rediscover yourself in the quiet. In the beginning, your absence was an act of defense, a survival instinct, a shield to stop yourself from collapsing. But with time, that silence became fertile ground. With every day that passed, with every message you didn't send, every emotion you held back, every time you chose to breathe instead of react, you were building. It wasn't visible, it wasn't loud, but something was taking shape within you, an inner structure made of clarity, discipline, and deep respect for your energy. Far from the person who made you feel invisible, you stopped fighting to be seen, and you finally began to see yourself. Rebirth isn't about becoming who you were before. It's becoming what you never had the courage to be, and you did it quietly. While the other was still wondering where you were, still looking for signs of your presence, you were immersed in your own transformation. Not for revenge, not to be missed, but because you finally understood something that changes everything. Someone who broke you does not deserve to witness your rebirth. They don't deserve the honor of seeing what you became after the pain. You rebuilt your boundaries. You redefined your values. You shifted your center of gravity from need to independence. You are no longer the same. There is now a filter between you and the world. It's called clarity. You see things differently. You speak less. You react less. You give less access. Because not everyone deserves to enter your inner space. Not everyone has earned the right to touch what you've rebuilt with such effort. This new version of you is made of calm. Not the superficial calm of someone who represses everything, but the structural calm of someone who no longer allows themselves to be pulled out of alignment. You no longer chase. You no longer explain. You no longer beg. You've become the kind of person who doesn't ask, but chooses. Who doesn't plead to ask, but steps back. Who doesn't raise their voice, but commands respect with their absence. Now, you're unrecognizable, and that unsettles the one who took you for granted. Because they expected you to return as you always did. That one message, one sign, one gesture would be enough to bring you back. But that version of you no longer exists. It died in silence. It was buried in distance. It was destroyed in every sleepless night where you cried without anyone noticing. In every day you felt unworthy, yet kept going. Now you are something else. You are presence that can't be bought, value that can't be begged for, distance that needs no justification. And the most powerful part is, you're not trying to prove anything. You don't need validation. You don't seek revenge. You're not provoking. Your transformation is real precisely because it isn't performative. It's not appearance. It's substance. It's not a role. It's truth. Those who look at you today and say you've changed don't even know the half of it. They see the surface, but they don't know the sleepless nights, the identity crises, the days when you wanted to reach out and didn't. They don't see the pain you turned into silence, the anger you turned into discipline, the loneliness you turned into strength. And now, in the place where there was once a wound, there is stillness, there is grounding, there is control. And the person who lost you now feels it, not just because you're gone, but because of what you've become. Even if they never see you again, they feel it. It's in the coldness of your voice should you ever respond. It's in the neutrality of your eyes should they ever meet again. It's in the aura around you now, the one that says, I no longer need your acceptance to feel whole. Your rebirth is their silent punishment, because now they can no longer come near you with superficial intentions. They can no longer approach with half-truths. They can no longer manipulate you with silence, because you've learned to master it better than anyone else. You've turned absence into a shield, calm into a gate, coldness into a filter. And while the world keeps running after appearances, you walk in truth. And those who once had access to you will now watch from a distance, unsure of how to reach you, unsure of how to speak to you, unsure of who you've become, because you did come back, but not for them, for yourself. There's a moment, silent, invisible, but final, when something inside you snaps. Not with noise, not with violence, but with the quiet tension of a knot finally loosening on its own. It's the moment you stop waiting. Not because you gave up, but because you finally saw that nothing you're waiting for is worthy of your time. And in that realization, you are set free. Waiting is a slow poison. It dresses itself as patience, compassion, depth. But in truth, it chains you to something that no longer exists. Or worse, something that never did. You wait for messages, calls, for gestures, explanations, apologies, comebacks. You wait for the other person to realize, to change, to finally choose you. But as you wait, you wither, day by day, minute by minute, until there's almost nothing left of who you are, only the shadow of someone suspended between what they hope for and what never arrives. And then you stop, not because your heart is empty, but because your eyes are finally open. You see that someone who truly wanted you would never have left you waiting. You see that every day you spent hoping was a day stolen from your growth. You see that the return you were imagining was nothing but illusion dressed as hope. And so, you make the hardest decision of all. You let go. There's no revenge in this gesture, no rage, just clarity, lucidity, power. Because the person who stops waiting is the one who has also stopped depending. They've cut the invisible thread that kept them tied to a story that already ended, to a person who was already gone, to an idea that no longer had any link to reality. And when you stop waiting, the other person feels it, even if you never say it, even if you never explain it. They feel it in the void. They feel it in the silence that no longer seeks answers. They feel it in the way you've stopped checking, stopped messaging, stopped reacting. They feel it in your stillness, in your new calm, in the effortless neutrality you now carry. Because your waiting was a chain, and now that it's broken, they realize they've lost something that's never coming back. The one who trained you to chase, to justify, to always understand, now finds themselves face to face with a wall, not built from anger, but from indifference. And there is no weapon more ruthless than a person who has learned to expect nothing from anyone. Because a person who doesn't wait anymore has no weak spots, no fantasies, no emotional debts, no open doors. And that's what unsettles them the most. You're no longer predictable, no longer available, no longer vulnerable. You are simply still gone, elsewhere. The end of waiting is the beginning of rebirth. Because now, all the space you once filled with longing is yours again. All the time you wasted on someone who couldn't see you is yours. All the energy you spent searching for signs comes back into your hands, and you do something different with it. You use it to rebuild, to evolve, to rise. They always come back, but only when you've stopped waiting, only when you no longer care. But now you're not even there to notice, because you haven't just stopped waiting. You've stopped wanting. You've learned the deepest truth. Anyone who needs to lose you to understand your worth never truly deserved you. Because someone who only sees your value in your absence never really saw you at all. You no longer wait for apologies, because you no longer need closure. You no longer wait for attention, because you've learned to stand alone. You no longer wait for signs, because your direction is clear, even without anyone's guidance. And most of all, you no longer wait for someone to give you what you now know how to give yourself. Respect, peace, strength. Waiting is how you stay small, how you stay still, how you stay chained. But you don't wait anymore. You choose, you move, you live. And those who lost you that may try to return, what they'll find is someone new, someone who no longer needs to be filled, who no longer has unanswered questions, whose heart is no longer hanging on a maybe. Now they know your waiting is over, and with it every chance of stepping back into your world like before. Because anyone who could remain silent while you begged for presence can no longer be part of your present. Because anyone who ignored your waiting does not deserve to witness your freedom. There comes a day when you stop looking back, not because there are no memories, not because there wasn't love, pain, waiting, or hope, but because everything you've become now stands between you and the place where you once lost yourself. That place has a name, yes, but more than that, it has an energy. The energy of humiliation, emotional dependency, and one-sided struggle. And you're not there anymore, you're beyond it, you never go back, not ever again. Closure doesn't come with a loud slam. It comes with a door that closes slowly, silently, but with the weight of an irreversible decision. You've forgiven everything, even the things no one ever apologized for. You've understood everything, even what the other never had the courage to explain. You've felt everything, even the emptiness of the days when no one was there. But now, it's done. There's nothing left to say. And more importantly, there's nothing left to give. Anyone who made you beg for attention will never again have access to your intimacy. Anyone who played with your presence will never again enjoy your silence. Anyone who ignored you at your most vulnerable won't even have the privilege of hearing your voice again. Because true closure doesn't come through words, it comes through absolute absence, through the kind of indifference born from clarity, through the ruthless calm of someone who has learned to be enough. You no longer return to the places where you were wounded. You no longer re-enter conversations that emptied you. You no longer explain yourself to those who never wanted to understand. You no longer justify yourself to those who judged you. You no longer seek love where you once found only neglect. Because now you know, your energy is not for everyone. Your presence is not a favor. Your heart is not a revolving door. Now there is distance, and not distance measured in miles, but in evolution, in dignity, in emotional sovereignty. This distance protects, filters, selects, and within that distance, you have become untouchable, not because you feel superior, but because you're no longer available, no longer accessible, no longer vulnerable to the same things that used to destroy you. The coldness you carry isn't cruelty, it's wisdom, it's self-protection, it's self-respect. And anyone who doesn't understand that has no place in your new life. They didn't lose you because you vanished. They lost you because you became something they never would have known how to hold. Because those who only wanted half of you have no idea what to do with your wholeness. There's no going back. Because going back would mean there's still space in you for what once broke you. And you are no longer broken. You are whole. The sleepless nights are gone. The illusions that kept you checking your phone are gone. The waiting that froze your life is gone. What remains is silence. And inside that silence, your strength. The door is closed, and it will not open again. Not out of pride, but out of respect. Because anyone who had the chance to hold you and didn't, doesn't deserve to witness the version of you that learned to shine alone. You don't go back, because what you are today is far more important than what you were looking for yesterday. And if anyone wonders how you did it, if they try to knock again, if they try to come back as if nothing ever happened, they'll find a closed door. They'll find a silence that doesn't seek explanations. They'll find a new presence, unreachable, sharp, untouchable, because that's who you are now. Untouchable. Write it in the comments as a statement, a decision, a final line. I am untouchable. And if this video spoke to that quiet part of you, the part that's finally choosing not to return to the places where you were once underestimated, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. Every week, new words, cold, clear, and real, for those choosing never to go back.